Jim Rosemergy, and he's got Nancy with us today. I first heard of Jim Rosemergy when I was studying to be a licensed unity teacher back in the 70s, and late 70s, early 80s. And Jim started his spiritual deepening, his journey into meditation and prayer when a classmate, while you were in ministerial school, asked him to pray with her and to before classes each week. And that started his journey. And to me, Jim Rosemergy is a mystic. And it shows in all of his writings. And his last, this is the last book you've written, not necessarily the last book you will, right?
That's right.
Okay, it's called How to Be a Wick in God's Candle. And our prayer chaplain studied it all year last year. And I was looking in the front of it, and I saw that, because I knew he'd written a whole slew of books. He's written 14 books. I won't list them all here. Are they in order here?
No, okay,
I was going to say, that is just, you're getting more, more verbiage, verbal or whatever. Anyway, he's written, and I think my favorite book of all of your books is A Daily Guide to Spiritual Living. And in that book, it's 48 weeks, right? You take a break every 4 weeks. And it's a daily lesson. And I tell you, it changed my life. So that was the book that changed my life. And but all of his books are life-changing. We just had a spirit group last year, or earlier this year, that did Even Mystics Have Bills to Pay. Okay? That's another one of Jim's books. So after ministerial school, since then he has served as vice president of Unity School of Christianity for a number of years. That's when I first met Nancy, when she was running the retreat department, and I had booked a retreat. Huh? Okay. Well, just Harmony House. And Harmony House was a house on the grounds of Unity Village where ministers could go for retreat. So that's when I first met Nancy. And so over these 40 years, he served 5 Unity churches, has written all these books, and is an icon, in my opinion, in the Unity movement. And I am just so excited that he and Nancy, well, they retired after 40 years. What, 6 months ago? Has it been a year and a half? I can't believe it. We're friends on Facebook, so I keep up with them all the time. And they bought an Airstream camper, and they have been traveling this wonderful country for the past year and a half. And not only that, as if I didn't love them enough already, they went vegan almost 5 years ago. Yes! Because Jim survived that was a little sketchy whether he was going to survive his heart condition, and he not only survived, but on his vegan food plan is thriving. So please help me welcome Jim Rosemergy.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I was wondering who it was about, It was amazing. And Catherine, that was an original song, is that true?
That's right.
Wasn't that beautiful? And Brendalyn has been here 24 years. That's kind of rare in the Unity movement, where you've got someone to be your shepherd and to be with you through all the challenges of life. And here she is, and just doing a wonderful job. So I want to give her a big hand. And here we are at Unity Santa Fe. It's, we've been traveling all around the country. We've seen all kinds of landscape. And here it is so different. There is a simplicity about it, in the landscape. And I think it gets reflected in the architecture. We've noticed that. There's no skyline here, because you want to be able to see the beauty of what is around you. And I have a feeling, and you all know this better than I would. I'm just considering it, that when there's a simplicity to the landscape, it impacts you, so that perhaps there's a kind of simplicity to your own life. Maybe it strips away some of the other, I don't know. But that's the impact that it's had on me. And here Nancy and I are, what are we living in, I don't know, 200 square feet or whatever it is. Good thing we like each other. 48 years of marriage, so that's wonderful. So it's great to be here with you, and I want to talk to you today about radical living. When is life at its best for you? When you're at Unity Santa Fe, right? That's one thing. Maybe when you're with family or friends. Maybe when there's some goal that's been achieved, or you're experiencing your health. Or maybe you've been ill, and now you have your energy and your vitality back. And it's so good. And all those are good answers for when is life at its best. But for me, life is at its best when it's natural. When there's a kind of ease about it. It's like water seeking its own level. When we're in tune with the infinite, with the cosmic forces. Life's at its best when we're in tune with it. Can you imagine resisting cosmic forces? Or to life be? Maybe exactly the way it is, right? Possible. We resist being who we really are. Years ago, I was at Minister in the Field. I went back to Unity Village to be with the ministerial students. Talked to them about what it was like to be in the field ministry. And I was talking to them about Circulation Day. You know what that is? You know what Circulation Day is? Some of you. Circulation Day is when you go into your home and you look at all those various items that are out of circulation. You're going to put them back in circulation. You're not using them. So Circulation Day is like a giant garage sale, except everything's free. And what happens on a Friday, everybody comes. We've done this in our last ministry in Fort Myers. And you set up like a giant department store outside. And there's furniture, appliances, linens, household, sporting goods, toys, electronics, sporting goods, like this giant garage sale outside. You set it all up on Friday, everybody comes. And then on Saturday it happens. Except it's not members of the congregation who are sharing their out of circulation things with one another. You make it available to the community, to the people that are in need. And so they come on Saturday. And it's a powerful experience because it teaches the congregation to give with no thought of return. How? And it teaches us to withhold our judgment. Because you see people on Circulation Day, they'll come to a linen table. I've seen it. Somebody's there with a big box. There's no discernment. They just take their arm and just whoosh, sweep it in and drop everything into the box. And then you have an opportunity to whether you're going to condemn that or judge it in some way. So I'm talking to the ministerial class about this. And there is a man from Africa, he's in the back, and raised his hand. He said, Jim, that'll never work in Africa. It might work in the United States, but it won't work in Africa because the people are so deprived. And I said to him, you forget one thing, and it is that it is our nature to give. It is natural that we give. And he paused, and then I saw him, his head moving up and down, and he understood. All of us want to reap an abundant harvest, do we not? Yes. But we're not all willing to sow. Can you imagine a farmer, and he's holding on to his seeds, and he goes out every day in his field, and he looks, and he's looking for a field that's white unto harvest, and it doesn't come to be. He's holding on to the seed. Why would someone do that? If it's our nature to give, why would we hold on? Feeling would be what? Fear, would it not? and judging by appearances. Because by all appearances, when you give something, you've actually created lack. That's the way it appears. True? I had it, I gave it away, I don't have it anymore. So this wonderful thing called giving, by all appearances, if you judge by that, it actually creates lack. And fear and judging by appearances is why people resist their own nature, which is actually be able to give. Interesting that our God has created a completely different kind of universe. That when you take one kernel of corn and you plant it in the ground, there's a stalk that comes up and there's 2 ears in it. Not 1 ear, 2 ears. And many kernels. What a return on investment. Wouldn't you like to have that in your stock market, your portfolio, if you've got one? Because, if you plant 1 kernel and you get 1 in return, it's 100% return. And then 2, and then some of you that are mathematicians, it's immense. I did this one day. I took a kernel of corn, an ear of corn, not so big, not very big. This is hard to do. I counted them. You ever do that? No, probably not. I counted the kernels in an ear of corn. 240. 240. And it's just a small one. When you plant 1 kernel of corn, you don't get 1 ear, you get 2. 480. Wow. That's the kind of universe that we live in. That's return on investment. And I don't know what it is. It's 100,000-fold, maybe 1 million. I'm not sure what it is. You mathematicians, you can figure that out. So, there was a woman, and her husband had died. And the man that her husband had worked for came to visit her. He was a prophet. His name was Elijah. And he came to the woman, and obviously she was experiencing one of the deepest sense of loss and lack that anyone could ever experience. And we all know that when you think lack, what does it tend to create? More lack. So if we look at the story, there's got to be, if it's true to principle, there's got to be some example where more lack is on the horizon for her. And look at the story, you see it's true. Because her sons were about to be sold into slavery. The man who came to visit was Elijah, the prophet. And he knew a principle, which is you have to start with what you have. No matter what challenge you have in your life, you have to start where you are. Where else can you start? You have to start with what you have. He knows that, the prophet. So he says to the woman, what do you have? And her response is dripping with lack. She says, your maidservant has only, it's a lack word, only a small jar of oil. But Elijah knows that's enough. You have to start with what you have. And so he asked her to gather all the containers that she could. And probably the boys are sent out to gather all these containers. What's happening there? He's having her start with what she has. Then the next step is all these containers. What's happening? There is an expectation that's being created, and there's a sense of receptivity that's being created. Next thing he says is, we have all the containers now, close the door. Let's shut out all the negativity that might be coming from your neighbors. Let's shut out all the negativity that might be actually coming from within you, to get metaphysical about it. Right? And then he says to the woman, well, let's take from your small flask of oil and let's start pouring. So from the small flask, this is a miracle on the way now, fills up one of these containers. And then another. She said, bring me another one, bring me another. So she's filling one after the other. She said, bring me another, and there isn't none. oil stops flowing. Another principle for us. We receive according to our capacity to receive. You understand? No more receptivity, no more flow. And it stops. So are you getting the principles here? Start with what you have. You have to use what you have. You've got to create a sense of expectancy and receptivity. You've got to shut out the negativity. Use what you have. And then he says to the woman, you can sell what you have, the oil, and you can pay off your debts, and you can live on the rest. Seems to make sense. However, I can assure you, no prophet of God would ever imply that oil or the proceeds from oil are supply. They are not. Because they can run out. The supply has to be something that's always there. And so when he says to her, you can live on the rest, on what remains. What remains? What remains is what she learned and what you have now just learned. You have to start with what you have. Create a sense of expectancy. You have to shut out the negativity, say no to it. You have to use what you have. That's the rest. That's what remains. And that woman could live on that the rest of her life. And now in just, 5 minutes it took me to tell that story? You can live on that for the rest of your life. So let's begin to move now and talk a little bit about radical living and radical generosity. Because radical living, you will find, requires a radical breakthrough. For you to be able to live the kind of life that you want to live, that you know intuitively is there for you. Nancy and I experienced this. At the Unity of Fort Myers, we had a couple buildings on campus, and we had used one and outgrew that, and we went to the other one, we outgrew that one, and we all decided that we needed a new church building. And so we had a man named Tom Mazzoni, who was one of these fundraising experts, wonderful, incredible man, dear friend to this day, come in and examine us and tell us how much money we thought we could raise. He said, you can raise about $600,000, maybe $800,000, but that's it. Well, we've been talking to architects and contractors, and the minimum of what we wanted would cost $1 million. And not only that, we had a town hall meeting, and a few people in the church said, we've got an indebtedness of about $500,000, so maybe you should pay that off before you do another building. And so the board, we met, and we decided we'd set a goal of $1.5 million. So I told Tom. He said, oh no, that's not going to work. You're going to fail. You need to set the congregation up for knowing that this is going to happen. You have to work your way through this in some way. One of our licensed Unity teachers named Christina Bowman, who had a deep, incredible Southern accent. She looks at Tom, she says, you don't know Unity. And that turned out to be true. Because we had our commitment Sunday, and the commitments turned out to be $1,518,000. As it turned out, it took $2.1 million to actually build the building. So we had to do this again. But we had these meetings, many of them were in our home. And we were talking about how much Unity meant to us and so forth and so on. And after every one of these meetings, I would say to Nancy, well, what's our number going to be? Because if you're a ministry, you got to lead, right? So what's our number going to be? And it actually ended up growing tenfold. But we encountered something called radical generosity. Because we kept moving and moving that number up, and then all of a sudden, we got a number, and our egos pushed back and said, you can't do that. That if you do that, it will be your financial demise. That if you do that, you won't be able to have the retirement that you want to have. So it pushed back on us Jesus actually talks about that. One of the Beatitudes, he says, "Blessed are you when men revile and persecute you for my name's sake," for the sake of spiritual growth, for the sake of the unfoldment of Christ. He says, you're blessed when you experience that persecution. Now, there can be persecution outside, certainly. But for our purposes, metaphysically, we're metaphysicians, right? We're not talking about persecution that comes from outside. The one that we really have to deal with is the one that comes from inside. The one that says, you can't do this. That if you do, this will happen and that will happen. And so what you have to do is stand your ground. And what we found in experiencing radical generosity is you keep pushing, and the ego pushes back. You've got it squirming now. Your ego is squirming. That's exactly where you want it. Because when it squirms, you're on the verge of a radical breakthrough. To be able to move into a kind of living that you know is there for you, but you've never experienced it before. And so when you keep pushing, standing your ground, what happens, where at first there's this fear, suddenly there's this peace. You've broken through. And the freedom is immense. And so we ended up with a whole congregation that experienced that. And it isn't just true with regard to finances. It's true of everything. Anytime there is something where your ego pushes back on you, you've got it squirming, you're blessed. That's what you're looking for. Because that's where the breakthrough is. The problem is when all that squirming comes and fear comes up and the doubt comes up and all those things, let's just admit it, it's there. When all that comes, we think it's us. We think we're afraid. We're fearful. We're doubtful. No, we're not. As Brendalyn said earlier today, it's the Christ. We're the Christ. An expression of the presence of God here in this cosmos. That's the truth of our being. The one that's shaking, squirming, who's that? That's the false one. That's the one you have been convinced that you are. It's not you at all. See, another example of this, we'll talk about this more in a workshop later today, but forgiveness. Forgiveness, you know, it's disrupting your life physically, relationships with other people, certainly with that individual. You know you need to forgive. And so you go to step forward to do that, and then what happens? The false one says, no. They did you wrong. They need to apologize to you. You don't need to be forgiving them. You're okay in your justification and your feeling. And the Spirit will say, you know, it's really not about the other person. It's really about you. That's where the breakthrough is, right? So and we'll talk more about that later this afternoon, but that's an example, one of the most important examples for a human being, is to be able to break through, a radical breakthrough, so that you open your heart again. The reason you're having difficulties with lack of forgiveness is you closed your heart. And open your heart again. That's what forgiveness is. You return to love again. So, you need to live radically. I think I'll be able to, at the end of this day, call you radical friends, where we can be like water. You know, water is one of the weakest substances on earth. It's completely non-resistant. In our travels by mountain streams and mountains, we've seen it all. But that water, in its persistence, it will wear every mountain to the sea. Every mountain will eventually rest at the bottom of the sea. Because water is being true to itself. It seeks its own mountain, and it just moves around those rocks, and as you know, it takes a long, long time. But that's what's going to happen. It's true to itself. And that's what has to happen with us, isn't it? We have to be true to ourselves, who we are. To be able to make those radical breakthroughs, to be able to live radically as we never have before. So, can I call you my radical friends?
Yes.
Can I? Yes. Anybody say, no, I'm not in? You're all in, aren't you?
Yes.
My radical friends. Unity of Santa Fe. So it is. Amen.
Amen.
But we want, I was Brendalyn, it feels so comfy being here, doesn't it? Because so much of your consciousness, I think, is very much attuned to where we are, and we're attuned to you. And one of the things Brendalyn said was, we do the meditation after the lesson. So we've done that for years and years. Because what you can do is you can take these ideas and you can take them into the stillness, which is what you have to do anyway, right? So shall we do that together?
Yes.
My radical friend. So let's just, if you would, become comfortable. Take a deep breath with me. And just think of yourself for a moment as just a drop of water. Perhaps falling from high above, high on the side of a mountain, forming a little rivulet in the stream, feeling that tug to be who you are, to travel to the sea. Nothing will stand in my way. Not the greatest boulder. I will float beside it. I will join others like me. Non-resistant. Ever feeling the tug of the great sea. The voice within me saying, be who you are. Resist not. Just be. And what am I? What is natural for me? Natural to get up when I have fallen. Stand tall once again. Natural for me to give. Natural for me to love. Natural to be still. Natural to let go. Natural to declare, it is not I, the presence within, who does the work. There's no resistance in me. I am like water, flowing to the sea. Not alone. With other droplets, radical friends, just like me. Onward always. Peaceful, even though I may be tumbling at times. Sometimes resting in a still pool. Sometimes going in circles. And there I feel the tug to the sea. The voice that says, be what you are. So I rest now in the silence, true to what I am, in the silence. Be like water. Not only is the mountain moved, but it rests at the bottom of the sea. So, my radical friends, take a deep breath now. Let the rise and fall of your chest bring you to this time and place.